If we'd like to approve the minutes of the July 15th meeting and review those.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
They are approved. Do we have any unfinished business to discuss? Okay, well then we'll go on to the new business. First part of that being the IRC chapters 10 and 12 through 24.
Okay, before we get started here, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Sean Radnick. I'm the new inspections director. I took over for Bruce. This is my first week and my first meeting, so I look forward to getting to know everybody here. So, we do have a little bit of a change on the new business today. The IMC and the IFGC codes were supposed to be presented today, but the presenter has some issues and is not able to present today.
Okay.
So we're asking to table those until the next meeting.
All right, we can certainly do that.
With that, I guess we'll get started with the IRC.
Okay.
Hello, I'm John with Residential Mechanical Inspector. We'll go ahead and start with Chapter 10. Basically, 10 through 12, there are no changes. There are no changes through 10 or 12. Chapter 13, Section M1301.1.1, flood-resistant installation. The staff recommends continuing the local amendment. Going to Chapter 14, heating and cooling equipment and appliances. Page 14-1. Once again, the staff recommends continuing the existing local amendment, and that deals with Section M1401.5, and that is flood hazard. Moving on to Chapter 15, exhaust systems. Page 15-1. One change that was done in that section for duct termination was including the openings in ventilated soffits. So it's if manufacturer instructions do not specify termination location, the exhaust duct shall terminate not less than 3 feet in any direction from openings into buildings, including openings in ventilated soffits. And on that same page, 15-1, section 15M1502.4.5, they prohibited booster fans for dryer vents. So domestic booster fans shall not be installed in dryer exhaust systems.
Is that a continuing change?
No, it's a significant change, or it's something new.
And we've decided, we won't allow them?
Correct.
I know that general construction, housing, a lot of times that you can't make the dryer vent length without a booster fan. Is that a problem?
It can be. I know looking at residential dryers, a lot of times we have to make sure that what they're buying has enough length to it. It
Right.
eliminates some choices on what they can, and then sometimes it'll put maybe force a dryer vent in an area where you don't want it, like by the front door or something like that, where it's kind of an issue. So there's a concern on the boosters that it's not a listed product, or just not liking the idea of the maintenance on the booster fan.
From what I read in the significant change book, it wasn't, they really didn't give a specific answer, if you will. I can say that in all the years I've done it, I've never once seen a booster fan. They were always able to work it out. I know in the past there's been concern on fire hazard as far as making sure the right one, because there are some that are not UL listed that could put in or can be put in.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm fine with it. I've gone with the same. We've used them before on occasion when we needed to because there was no other way to get a dryer. If you have a dryer in the middle of the bowels of a, building, and we can't install it then versus, coming up with a way to install it. That would be my only thought. And they were always UL listed as far as, to do that. So, I just,
Now this is just domestic. Now this is
right,
just
right, I get that.
okay. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm fine with it. Okay.
Okay.
I just was wondering.
All right. Next section 1503.6 on page 15.3. Staff recommends continuing the local amendment. It was a deletion of an exception. Moving on to chapter 16. Section 1601.4.1. Once again, staff recommends continuing the local amendment that has to do with the flood hazard. Chapter 17, section 1701.2, opening locations. We recommend continuing with local amendment, and once again, that has to do with flood hazards. Chapter 18 just had one significant change, and that's on page 18-2, section M1802.4, and has to do with a blocked vent switch. It states oil fire appliances shall be equipped with a device that will stop burner operation in the event that the venting system is obstructed. Such device shall have a manual reset and shall be installed according to manufacturer's instructions. And then once again, that's a change. Chapter 19, there are no changes or amendments. Chapter 20, page 20-2, section M2005.1. Recommend continuing the existing local amendment. That just has to do with deleting or taking out the chapter 24 or 28, I'm sorry, and stating that it's under North Dakota Plumbing Code. Chapter 21, page 21-1, section M2101.3, protection of potable water. We recommend continuing the local amendment, the existing one. Page 21-3, section M2101.10, under tests. We currently have an amendment, but we'd like it to state a little bit different. There was a section that was left out. What the amendment states is hydronic piping shall be isolated and tested hydrostatically at a pressure of 1 and 1.5 times the maximum design pressure, not less than 100 pounds per square inch. The duration of the test shall not be less than 15 minutes. And what we'd like to add on that amendment is hydronic piping to be embedded in concrete shall be pressure tested and inspected prior to pouring concrete. Pages 21-4.
I got a question on that, sorry.
Yes.
So you're testing that piping, so this is for like in-floor heat?
In-floor heat, yeah, prior to pouring concrete.
So what is the norm for in residential? Where are they putting this piping? Are they putting it,
Both garage and basement, or if it's a slab on grade, they'll put it in the floor.
but are they putting it like in the sand layer, or are they
Nope.
actually embedding it in the concrete?
It's actually, you do the poly, the foam, piping, concrete.
Okay. Is it getting tested after the concrete's poured yet?
No, it's just that it wasn't stated in this section. There's another section in the code book that it states that it needs to be or inspected prior to pouring of concrete.
Sure. Which, I mean, I agree with, that makes sense. I'm just wondering if it needs to be tested afterwards too. I don't know what these guys are doing as far as the process, but if they're
They
putting,
usually leave the pressure on. So if they're, in the event that they do get a leak while pouring, or whatever the case may be, they'll notice it on the gauge. Most of the guys do anyway.
okay.
Yeah,
Because I know like if,
It's not required, no.
it's not required, but it's pretty typical.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't even mind having it be required that the pressure stay on through the pour. That wouldn't bother me at all. It's kind of the common practice, just so people can take a look, and if, something happened, they can hopefully get it resolved before the concrete's, done. But
well, especially if they're putting the rebar over the top of this piping and then guys are stepping on it, different things like that. I don't know. I don't know how often that leaks, but it seems like it could have a potential there of poking a hole in something.
we do a lot of it, and I haven't had one leak from that. Thankfully, the piping's pretty heavy duty,
Okay.
and they're good at putting the bar up on stands and then trying to kind of step around it. But we do, in our company, require that the pressure stay on it, so that when you're done with the pour, I want to still see pressure there. But, yeah, because
Yeah,
it's,
the problem, yeah, and this is just residential again.
Yes.
and it's usually got, a antifreeze in it. So if it's like this time of year and that house doesn't get heated early enough, the fluid still being in there it's visible. It's a, pink product, most of them, and the pressure. So it's usually it's if there is a leak that shows up, they're going to see it before they pour.
It's usually by the manifold anyway versus the piping. I get to see the actual piping leak. Usually it's at the manifold.
Correct.
Okay. No, I think it's fine as is. Then I just want to discuss it.
Okay, excuse me. Pages 21-4, section M 2101.11 through section M 2101.34. Basically what they did is they took this section from the ground source loop and duplicated it and put it in this area for hydronic piping. It's basically copied verbatim. A lot of it has to do with just the preparation of pipe, cutting it square, and manufacturer's installation and stuff. There's nothing data-wise that really changed from the other section. They just added it to this point or to this place. Also on page 21-5, section 21, M 2103.3, we recommend continuing the existing amendment. In chapter 22, special piping and storage systems, page 22-1, section M 2201.6, we recommend continuing the existing amendment. It has to do with flood resistance or flood resistant installation. Chapter 23, no changes.
What is the city seeing for? I mean, I imagine there's some people starting to put solar panels on their roof. What does the city require? Are they requiring an evaluation of that roof of that existing house to make sure it can take the weight of the solar panels? Or what's the process when someone wants to do this?
I've never dealt with the solar panels.
I'm not sure we've had that. I'm not sure we've had a permit for that or a request for that
Oh, yeah.
on the
Okay.
roof.
Okay,
They're being installed on the ground.
sure. Okay, we see a lot, I've seen a lot in Minnesota side. I'm sure they get some different tax savings or something, but they usually they require the roof to be looked at because these things weigh 10 pounds a square foot, so it's quite a bit of weight to add to a roof. But if you guys haven't seen it, then
We've seen one on the ground, but I don't think that we've seen one on the roof yet, but I can make sure that we're doing it that way.
yeah, I would watch that because, like I said, they're pretty heavy, and depending on the type, there's some that are slanted upward too that also become snow traps as well. So just something to be aware of.
Okay. Chapter 24, page 24-8, section 2407.7. We recommend continuing an existing amendment. Once again, it has to do with flood hazard.
What's that amendment about?
The amendment, I'm not real familiar with the flood hazard, but we amended, what I was told, we amended the flood hazard because we have local procedures or local amendments to cover what this covered, from what I gathered.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, as far as fuel gas, what specifically, what's the amendment about, is what I was just wondering.
Okay. 2407.
Sorry, I brought my code books, but I didn't bring them all.
You could open one.
I didn't bring this.
Well, I think what you're looking for though is it probably is in the, not even the code books.
Yeah,
but
what the
this-
amendment is,
Amendments.
right.
which is
The actual amendment?
What
Yeah.
is that called? Like, and that's the City of Fargo flood requirements or something. That's what we'd have to look in to find what it says.
Oh, right, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I don't have that specific amendment, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, moving on, page 24-10, section 2407.6.1. And also what also goes along with this is figure 2407.6.1. We recommend to continue with the existing amendment, and that amendment was deleting the two permanent openings for combustion air. Basically, it's the opening that goes directly to the attic. So you have a hole in your ceiling, it goes directly to the attic for combustion air in one low. We deleted that. And that's, once again, that's a existing amendment.
So do we ever actually review the City of Fargo flood requirement, that document? Who reviews that, or what's that process of? I mean, I know we go through and just say, oh, we're gonna delete this amendment, use that instead, but does that document ever get gone through?
I don't know what button to push.
The center one should do it.
I've been trying that one.
There you go.
The engineering department actually drew up the existing flood ordinance, and they amended it back in 2016. I don't think it will get reviewed anytime soon. The reason they amended it and readopted it is because that's the year that we enforced the new flood maps. I don't believe it gets reviewed on a regular basis.
So who actually is in charge of making the amendments or approving those then?
It would be Brenda Derrick, the city engineer.
Just her, that's what her decisions are to,
Well, what happened last time is they hired a consultant to go through the existing flood ordinance, and then they made recommendations based on history. And then the engineering department went through and adopted the ordinance. Does that answer the question?
yeah.
I think the concern is that there's amendments that are made by somebody that's other than, the codes. You folks, and then, for a review like this, and it apparently affects the uniform, mechanical code, residential code, that type of thing. And the question would be, would there ever be we review these things,
I can ask Brenda to talk with us about it at the next meeting.
I think that would be wise so that we have a better understanding of, and it may just be related to keeping things out of water or higher things, but if it's getting in the technical side of the code, that's probably something that should be seen by inspections department and our board. So let's just see what's in that document, I think, is probably what your concern
Well,
is.
and you would have to enforce whatever's in there, right?
Correct.
As the codes department, so I think we should maybe figure out, just take a look at it and see what's in there.
I don't think it's a bad idea
Yeah.
as part of this process to maybe have one day where we're,
Cause
through that.
we'll be accepting that as part of this code when we
Correct.
accept it. And
I'd agree with that.
so,
Yeah, I mean, I know there's structural things in there, for example, that I've seen that I don't necessarily agree with. Not saying I'm gonna go change them, but I think it'd be wise to have another group look at them and see what people's thoughts are on it.
It was a third party that did all the structural,
I
so
know.
the city's engineers did not do that.
No, I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think now that we've got 6 years of experience since that time period, it's probably more than overdue to be reviewed.
I can
It's
talk
just
to her.
part of this process.
Between Sean and I, we can talk to her and get
Okay.
it on the next agenda.
Sounds good.
Or maybe not the next one, but a future agenda.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Page 24-13, section 2407.11, combustion air. We recommend continuing the existing amendment, and this kind of ties together with the last one with the combustion air up in the attic. It's ducts, what the amendment will read, or reads, ducts shall not terminate in attic space.
Okay.
Page 24-46. Section 2417.4.1, test pressure. Staff recommends continuing the existing amendment, and that's adjusting the pressure test at 25 pounds. Page 24-51, section 2425.12. We recommend, it's residential and low heat appliance and flue lining. We recommend continuing the existing amendment. Page 24-54, section 2427.5.2, masonry chimneys. We recommend continuing the existing amendment. A significant change, which is on page 24-54, section G 2427.5.5.1. They deleted the exception that was there, and that allowed replacing a like appliance without lining the chimney. So that exception has been deleted or taken out.
so you can't, if there was for instance, a low efficiency furnace that didn't condense, that went into a chimney, and when they don't condense, you don't have problems with it. You can't reinstall a new low efficiency furnace
Without lining the
without
chimney.
lining the chimney.
Correct.
Okay.
Page 24-58, section G 2427.8, venting system and terminal clearance. There's two significant changes here, no amendment. The two changes were they basically did away with all the technical information is still there, but now they've got a diagram and a chart to show where you can exhaust furnaces or whatever the case may be, whatever you're exhausting as far as an appliance. It's kind of like the instruction manual on a furnace. They always had a picture of the house and a window and stuff, and they gave you clearances. That was not in the code book last time, and now it is. It makes it a little bit easier for the installers to be able to get the gist of what's going on. Next change would be 24, or page 24-75. Section G 2439.5 and section G 2439.5.1. The change is that they separated these two. They were together. It deals with the makeup air. There's two different styles of installation. One is when the dryer exhausts more than 200 CFM, then you have to bring in fresh air exhaust, or fresh air makeup. And the other one is, and the 5.1 is when the dryer is installed in a closet, and that's with anything 150 CFM. You have to have a vent high and low, kind of like combustion air for mechanical room. How if you're not bringing in fresh air, or if it's not direct vent, you have to have the registers on the outside wall to be able to bring in combustion air. And that's basically, they separated it to clarify it a little bit better than it was in the last 2018 code.
This is for gas-fired dryers?
Yes, gas dryers. Page 24-77, section G 2442.4, screen is the section. We recommend continuing the existing amendment. Basically, that's just putting screens on any kind of vents to an outdoor unit, making sure that there's screens on those intakes. Section 24, page 24-78, section G 2445, unvented room heater. The staff recommends discontinuing the existing amendment, discontinuing it.
What was the amendment?
That they could not be installed unvented room heaters, but now they've changed things. They've got oxygen depletion sensors on them and other safeties. So now that it's kind of came up, we decided to do away with the amendment. And that would be it. Chapters 25 through 43, staff recommends continuing the existing amendment on that, and that's deleting that in its entirety, because it's North Dakota Plumbing Code and stuff like that takes control of this stuff after that. And that would be it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we're moving on to the IFC and Ryan.
Good morning.
Morning.
We're going to start off the review of the International Fire Code. My name is Ryan Erickson, Fire Marshal with the Fargo Fire Department. We did break this up into several sections, and so that all the Fire Prevention Bureau here can get an opportunity to present some of this. So any point that you need to interrupt with questions, or if we get to a point where the board wants to stop and we want to move this, continue at the next meeting, we can do that also. So we'll have several opportunities to kind of break. With that, we'll start with chapter 1 here. One thing to kind of note about the fire code is the book is set up for some jurisdictions that have to adopt the fire code and don't have the companion building code or buildings department with them. So if you were like a fire protection district, you could adopt the fire code. And so a lot of what we're going to run through here at the beginning of chapter 1 is administrative stuff and a whole list of permits that we don't necessarily need in Fargo because we have an inspections department that handles that. But a lot of these get brought into the model codes as if you were a district that were adopting this and you had to enforce all this, say like in a county area or type of thing. So
Okay.
With that, it gets a little wordy at the beginning, but I'll move through these. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. But chapter 1, we have quite a few amendments here. Page 1-1, section 101.1. The local amendment is to insert City of Fargo into the name of the jurisdiction here. And in your packet, we have the full wording there, and everything that's underlined is the local amendment. Page 1-2, section 102.6, historic buildings, we delete as required in section 1103.1.1. And the reason for that is chapter 11, for the most part, is not adopted. and historically has not been adopted. It's the existing building section of the fire code. We do pick up a couple sections that you'll hear later today related to smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. Page 1-2, section 103.1. Again, we're inserting Fargo Fire Department for the name of the department, that section. Section 104.7, you'll hear several of these sections that are the same as we went through with the building code, where we're carrying over the same administrative language. This is one of those, 104.7 liability. So any suit instituted, it's the underlined section here, any suit instituted against an officer or employee because of an act or omission performed by that officer or employee in the lawful discharge of duties and under the provisions of this code shall be afforded all the protection provided by the city's insurance pool and immunities and defenses provided by other applicable state and federal laws, and shall be defended by legal representative of the jurisdiction until the final termination of the proceedings. The building official or any subordinate shall not be liable for the costs in any action, suit, or proceeding that is instituted in pursuance of the provisions of this code. This code shall not be construed to relieve from or lessen the responsibilities of any person owning, operating, or controlling any building or structure for any damages to persons or property caused by defects, nor shall the code enforcement agency or the city be held as assuming any such liability by reason of the inspection authorized by this code or any permits or certificates issued under this code. That's the same one that was in the IBC for that same section. Section 105.5 is all the operational permits, and in the fire code, there's two types of permits. There's operational permits that we issue on an annual basis, and then the business would just continue to renew them as long as they're in business. And then the next section is the construction permits. So if you were to go out and install something, that would be a one-time permit. So as we work through these, you just kind of keep that in mind that 105.5s are annual permits, and every year we see several of these kind of get added to the code. First one's a good example, section 105.5.1, additive manufacturing. This is a new permit that was added for 3D printing. We're suggesting that local amendment here is to delete this in its entirety. We are able to cover this on some of our other permits. The fire code does have a hot works permit that pretty much covers anything that's involving cutting, grinding, welding, and so we feel we can cover that adequately there.
Ryan, do these types of permits require a yearly inspection of these businesses also, or is it just a renewal?
It does involve an inspection. We do an annual inspection of all commercial properties. The logistics of these is that once you get a permit, what happens is we issue those out of the Fire Prevention Bureau here. So instead of having the crew inspect you, we would have a deputy fire marshal come out and inspect. And then upon that completion of the inspection, they would typically just issue that annual permit. Page 1-7, table 105.5.9. This is the annual permit for compressed gases. We're suggesting a local amendment to change it from 100 pounds for carbon dioxide systems to 500 pounds. And where we saw this come in was that a lot of systems have changed from compressed CO2 cylinders to liquid containers where it's liquid carbon dioxide. And so we set that at a typical limit where it's the taller container, so that we can regulate those. Section 105.5.14, energy storage systems. This was a new permit that we suggest that we remove because again, we can cover this with other permits and through other operational permits and through construction permits through the inspections office. Section 105.5.15. It's the exhibits and trade shows permit. This one has been in the code in the past. However, the fire department has not typically issued permits for this. So at this point, we're suggesting that we delete it because it's a permit that actually could be kind of out of our ability to issue if we were to issue it for every trade show and exhibit show. So we're recommending removing that also. Section 105.5.18, flammable and combustible liquids. This is a long-standing amendment where we increase the quantities before you're required to have a permit. It's for class 1A liquids exceeding 30 gallons, Class 1B in excess of 60 gallons, and Class 1C in excess of 90. Page 1-8, Section 105.5.18. This is subsection 3 of that same permit. We increase the quantities for Class 2 or 3A liquids in excess of 120 or 120 outside of the building, except for those directly connected to a fuel oil appliance. So again, this is just when you'd be required to have a permit based off how much flammable liquids you're storing. Page 1-8, it's section 105.5.19, floor finishing. We're suggesting that we delete this section in its entirety. 105.5.25, hot works operations, subsections 1, 5, and 6 are recommended for deletion, and this is another long-standing local amendment. Section 105.5.31, miscellaneous combustible storage, we're recommending that we remove that. Permitting requirements for this type of storage do not appear to be necessary. Page 1-9, 105.5.32, mobile food preparation vehicles. So this is like your food trucks that you see. The fire code brought this permit in last code cycle. We recommend that we continue to delete this. In the city of Fargo, they're currently regulated by the health department, and when the health department issues them, they do reach out to us. So it's we'd recommend that we delete that so there's just one permit through the city. 105.5.33, motor fuel dispensing facilities, long-standing amendment to delete this. This fuel dispensing facilities are regulated through the auditor's office, and again, we're involved in the inspection of that, but it's a license through municipal code. 105.5.36, open flames and candles. This is another long-standing amendment that reads, for the purposes of this provision, churches shall not be deemed an assembly area and shall not be required to obtain a permit to utilize candles in religious ceremonies. So typical places that are required to have an open flame and candle permit would be a restaurant that wanted to have candles on the table, every day. But it doesn't require that a church get the permit. Page 1-10, section 105.5.38, outdoor assembly event. This came in the code cycle, last cycle, as a way to kind of deal with gatherings and outdoor concerts and that type of stuff. We recommended it was deleted at that time, and we recommend that we continue to delete this section. And this is another case where the city of Fargo is setting up a permit for special events. And so given the First Amendment kind of conflict here and stuff, we'd prefer that would be operated through a citywide permit and not just the fire department. Section 105.5.40, plant extraction systems. This was a new permit that came in the last cycle that we recommend deleting. We recommend to continue to do that. Again, this is for typically processing marijuana and pulling out the oils and that type of stuff out of it. Most of those facilities are regulated specifically by the state health department through the law that was passed that allowed them to exist. Page 1-10, section 105.5.44, refrigeration equipment. We've carried this operational permit through without amending it, but in order to make it more clear, we're suggesting an amendment this year. And the amendment we're suggesting is that where the systems are regulated by Chapter 6 and containing more than 30 pounds of Group A2, B2, or B3 refrigerant, then they'd be required to have an annual permit. Before it wasn't fully clear on when they were required to have that because it was just referring to Chapter 6. And Chapter 6 really talks about all mechanical refrigeration. And so what we're trying to do is capture the large refrigeration systems that are using highly flammable or flammable and toxic refrigerants. Then they would be required to have an operational permit.
So we're talking NDSU or Sanford or Essentia or things like that?
I don't know that we have any out there right now.
with these classes of
Right.
refrigerants. Okay.
But I would guess the potential would be like a large storage freezer warehouse. But what the code's saying is that there's some drive to push away from ammonia and some of the other refrigerants, and then the replacements, which are more environmentally friendly, but are much more flammable.
Sure.
So it's kind of getting ready for the future is what it's looking like to me. But
And how would you guys know that?
most likely through the initial building permit, if it was called out on the mechanical sheets.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to be one of those things where when they're doing their inspections, and a lot of these facilities, when you get an operational permit from the fire department, you could have one or you could have 100. It's still just the one permit coming out. So a lot of these facilities that would have this are likely going to have one of the other permits, like high piled storage or hot works or something. So, we would be in there and looking for that.
So on your checklist or whatever would be, okay, they've got a refrigeration system, we need to check to find out what kind of refrigerant they're using?
Yeah, so like I said, we haven't typically seen that. I mean, a lot of them are ammonia when they get
Right.
that big.
Does ammonia doesn't meet this or isn't considered one of these groups?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have thought it would be. I think if you have an ammonia spill.
And if I understand it correctly, chapter 6 in the ammonia is ammonia was specifically kind of sectioned off and is regulated through one of the mechanical groups. I don't know if it's ASHRAE or one
Okay.
of those. So
Yeah, different kinds of refrigeration. If you have refrigeration in a mechanical cooling system in a large piece of equipment, there are requirements for exhausting and sensing and automatically turning on exhaust fans and makeup air to dilute and eliminate the refrigerant in the room. So, and ammonia would be one of them, along with many others. So. This just seems to kind of, so this is different than refrigeration equipment for cooling of a building versus refrigeration equipment for cooling of meat or produce or whatever.
So when you get to chapter 6, we'll kind of see some of those requirements, and I think that the requirements are probably there regardless of the use. This would be, if you're going to operate with these refrigerants, then we're going to require this annual permit so that we know that we're trying to identify those systems so that we know that we're looking at them so that there isn't an inadvertent leak or something like that the maintenance is occurring and that type of thing.
Okay.
Ryan, you guys still use these permits for making response crews aware of where these systems exist, and so when if they get a call there, they know what they're running into.
All of our inspections occur and we pre-plan at the same time. So yes, absolutely. Anything that we can identify like that, we'd pull into our pre-plan information so the crews would know when they get sent out.
Really one of the main reasons for the permitting is to awareness for the first responders. And that deal, so that continues through both police and fire. Anybody else would have to respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. Next one here, page 1-10, section 105.5.45, repair garages and motor fuel dispensing facilities. We'd like to continue our amendment where we delete the motor fuel dispensing facilities for the same reason that they're regulated through the auditor's office. Page 1-10, 105.5.49, temporary membrane structures and tents. We added this amendment to the last code cycle that permit is required for a tent when it's used for the purposes of assembly. And this was just trying to clean up between us and inspections on who would be issuing a permit when you have a temporary tent. Now we're into 105.6, which is all the construction permits. These would be your one-time permits when you're applying to build something. Again, you'll see that we delete a lot of these because many of them already require permit through the inspections department, so we don't want to just create double up permits here. Section 105.6.2, compressed gases, we're recommended that this gets deleted, again, due to that if you typically install that, you would need your permit through the inspections office. 105.65 is the energy storage systems. These are your big, large battery backups. We're recommending that get deleted. That would require an electrical permit also. 105.6.7 fire pumps and related equipment. We're recommending that that gets deleted. We would permit that through the sprinkler system permit. 105.6.10, the gas detection system. We're recommending that that gets deleted also. Again, it's getting covered under other permits. 105.6.11, gates and barricades across fire apparatus access roads. We're recommending that that gets deleted. We do review the site plans through the building inspection site plan routing. 105.6.12, hazardous materials. We're recommending that get deleted. Again, we cover those through their building permit process. 105.6.13, high piled combustible storage. We're recommending continue to delete that section. 105.6.15, LP gas. This is, we'd like to continue our local amendment here that the permit for an LP gas installation is required when a single container exceeds 2,000 gallons or there's more than 4,000 in aggregate. That matches section 6101.3, which you'll hear later. Page 1-11, section 105.6.16, motor vehicle repair rooms and booths. We're recommending that we delete that. Again, if they're gonna build that, it would be covered under a building permit. 105.6.17, plant extraction systems. This is the sections that were added to deal with processing marijuana or hemp. Could be for other things, but we recommend delete this because again, we would cover that through our building permit process. 105.6.18, private fire hydrants, recommending delete that section. 105.6.19, smoke control or smoke exhaust systems, we're recommending that permit be deleted. 105.6.20, solar photovoltaic power systems, your solar panels, we're recommending that that's permit be deleted. 105.6.21, special event structures. Again, we're recommending that this be deleted. This would be for your stages and that type of stuff at a concert. 105.6.23, standpipe systems, we're recommending that be deleted. That would also be covered under the sprinkler system permit. 105.6.24, this is to construct a tent. So we're covering it under the operation of the tent, so we're deleting the construction permit for the tent. That finishes the permit sections. Like I said, that was good. There's quite a few amendments there because we have a lot of permits that are in the fire code that we cover in different areas in the city, so. Next section, we're still in the administrative chapter, section 106.4, retention of construction documents. We'd like to continue our local amendment where we delete out the section that requires one set of the construction documents to be returned. We don't stamp the documents and send them back to the applicants. They're just retained electronically. Section 112.4, violation penalties. We continue our local amendment, and this would match the building code, and I'm thinking that the city attorney will probably make sure that this aligns with the penalties in state century code. Pages 1-15 and 1-16. This is one of the significant changes here, section 114.3 to 114.6, unsafe structures or equipment. They incorporated administrative sections that were previously in the IBC and they weren't in the fire code. So now they've been pulled over to the fire code. And they include the requirements for reports and notice to owners and the method of service to the owner. So it spells out how you need to notify the owner. Like I said, this was typically only in the building code, but since some jurisdictions work exclusively off this, they've brought it over to the fire code also. That completes chapter 1, the administrative chapter. Chapter 2 is definitions. I did call out 3 definitions here just to make you aware of. The first one's additive manufacturing. That's that definition that we talked about already that they added in the fire code for 3D printers. A lot of that you'll hear about in 3D printing in the fire code is because they've come up with giant 3D printers that they use in manufacturing, and so it's not just necessarily plastic, it could be metal or other mediums that they're using to make things. Next definition, critical areas. Added a definition for critical areas for the emergency responder radio coverage. And so when we get to that section, it will call those out, and those are areas that would be required to meet radio coverage in a building. Energy storage systems is a new definition to further clarify the requirements of Chapter 12, which is where they pulled together all the energy storage system requirements in the fire code. That takes care of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is general requirements in the fire code. This is the one chapter that applies to all buildings.
Can we ask for a short break in between chapters?
Sure. Yep. If we want, would you like a break in between that?
I think we're all good if you guys want to continue.
Okay. Chapter 3 is the general requirements. These provisions do apply to all occupancies in all buildings. The chapter's pretty short. So we have a couple amendments here. Page 3-3, prohibited open burning, section 307.1.1. This is a new amendment. However, it was our practice for when open burning, including recreational fires, are prohibited. And so we'd like to get this into code so that it's consistent. The amendment is that all open burning, including recreational fires, is banned when the fire index is at high, very high, or extreme level, and any time during a red flag warning. So again, this would codify our policy regarding open burning and recreational fires.
How does the public find out about the high, very high, extreme, or red flag?
Yep. So today on our website, if you hit the recreational fires rules, it'll click you to a link, and then that link takes you to the state actually sets that, and then it changes every morning. So, you know, even like I said, today, the policy would be, if you wanted a recreational fire tonight, you could click that, check that map, see that Cass County's in low fire risk, and then you could proceed.
Thank you.
So that's, you know, someone wants a bonfire in their backyard, that's recreational fire, correct?
Yeah, difference, recreational fire is a fire smaller than 3 feet that you would typically have in your backyard, you know, either in a fire ring. And there's some rules surrounding that on extinguishment and being attended. Bonfire is also in the code. That's bigger. That's, you know, kind of like your high school event. We do issue permits for those. And so they would be restricted to the same weather conditions, but they do require a permit to have those.
What about, you know, it's pretty popular now, people have the, like the propane little fires on their decks and stuff like that. Would that be under recreation fire as well, those types of things?
They are regulated in the fire code, but they're a little fluid. So if you buy a device, a lot of times it'll defer to the manufacturer's instructions. There is some regulations in the fire code about where you can use a propane powered device. They're in chapter 6, I believe.
Okay.
But yeah, if you're going to create your own is where it gets a little complicated. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Page 3-4, section 308.1.4, open flame cooking devices. This is a long-standing amendment in Fargo where we add the language for balconies or decks, and then we, in exception number 3, allow you to have up to a 120-pound cylinder on the deck. The code comes with a 2.5-pound cylinder, so it just seemed pretty impractical for us to be able to go out and enforce that you could only have the 1 pound kind of camp type cylinder. So we'd recommend to continue that long-standing amendment.
And that's so the typical apartment dweller can have a gas barbecue on their deck and not be burning charcoal and taking the buildings down.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
Section 308.3, Group A occupancies. This was an amendment that was added a couple cycles ago. Section 1.4 that would allow open flame devices for food warming. And this was really put in so that we could be clear that those sternal cans are allowed to be used. Otherwise, it was a little gray about whether those were permitted, so. Page 3-11, section 319.4, fire protection. This is the section for the mobile food trucks. We're recommending that we continue our amendment from the last code cycle, that we delete section 319.4.1. And what that section was for hood systems in in the food truck, so you'd have to have like an ANSEL protection system. And the difficulty we have here is that a lot of these are not built here, or there's nothing that would restrict them to be built here, so we really have no way to regulate how they're constructed. You know, if you think about the street fair, there's trailers that come from all over the place, and so the other requirements for the fire extinguisher and how you have your propane tanks and types of connection, we're gonna keep in there. But the fact of whether or not you have an ANSEL suppression system in there, we're recommending that we continue to delete that. And then a couple significant changes here, page 3-13, section 320, additive manufacturing. This is a new section that regulates 3D printing. Most of the requirements existed in the code prior, however, they pulled them all together in this section, clarifying the code's intention that the section applies to 3D printing, and industrial 3D printing is restricted to occupancy groups associated with manufacturing. Section 321, artificial combustible vegetation. So this is a new section that got added regulating artificial vegetation over 6 feet in height and within 5 feet of buildings. That's it for chapter 3. Chapter 4 is the emergency planning and preparedness section. Just 3 significant changes in there. Section 403.7.1, fire safety and evacuation plans. A new section was added to require fire safety and evacuation plan for group I3, and that the plan needs to contain any special actions that are required of staff. I3 is your institutional settings, so a lot of times you can be dealing with people that can be locked in. And so the staff, the plans are very dependent on staff actions. Section 403.7.3.2, fire safety plan. This is a new section requiring a fire safety plan be available and include any special locking arrangements and locations of cells. Section 405.1, general. Added language to clarify that lockdown drills do not count as evacuation drills. Evacuation drills are required to involve actual evacuation to assembly point through exits. Exceptions are included for special occupancies. I guess just a note, in practice, we have allowed active shooter drills to count as an evacuation drill so long as they're using a component of evacuation. The lockdown drill that they're typically referring to here is where they would just close all the doors and lock them. And so there's not really an active response there. Chapter 5 and chapter 6 are fairly short. I could go through those two, and then if we're looking for a break, we can stop there. Okay, chapter 5, page 5-1. And chapter 5 is, I forgot to mention, chapter 5 is the fire service features of a building that's in the fire code here. So page 5-1, section 501.3.1, site safety plan. This is a new section that requires a site safety plan for the site during construction. So this would point you to chapter 33, which talks about larger construction sites that should have a safety plan on how to deal with a fire. Section 503.4, obstruction of the fire apparatus access road. We'd like to continue our local amendment that adds the language, enforcement of such prohibited parking may be accomplished in the same manner as regulations contained in Article 8-10 and Section 9-0705 of the Fargo Municipal Code. And that's just to allow us to regulate parking in the same way that the municipal code contains. Page 5-4, section 507.5.4, obstruction. This is a new amendment that we're looking to add in this obstruction for hydrants. An approved hydrant marker shall be installed immediately adjacent to the rear of the hydrant. So this new amendment is to codify the city's requirement to have a hydrant marker installed. And as you guys all know, the reason for those hydrant markers is so that we can find them once they're buried in snow. It's been done in practice. We just wanted this in code here. Section 508.1, a significant change. They added a new section requiring a fire command room in F1 and S1 occupancies greater than 500,000 square foot. So that would be kind of typical of your new Amazon warehouses that are springing up. Section 510.5.1, mounting of the donor antennas. This is the emergency responder radio coverage section. This new section requires that signage at donor antenna locations that prohibits moving the antenna. And the reason for that is that movement of the antenna can affect performance of the in-building communication systems. So they'll put these on the roof, sometimes on mobile stands, and so they want them signed so that nobody inadvertently points them to a different direction. Chapter 6 is building services and systems. Portions of Chapter 6 were reorganized for clarity. So, when you're looking at your code book, that's why you're going to see a whole bunch of black bars on the side. But a lot of it was just moving it around and reorganizing for better reading. Section 603.5 listing. Section was revised to include the specific UL requirements for power taps and current taps. So that would be what we typically call a surge protector, and for specifically to I2 occupancy, so where your hospitals could have surge protectors. Section 604.5, maintenance of elevators. This is a new section that was added that requires elevator lobbies of fire service access, occupant evacuation, and where hoist weight protection is required to be free of storage and furniture. Section 604.7, storage. This is a new section that clarifies that storage is prohibited in elevator cabs and machine rooms. This is an existing requirement, but it's now clarified. Section 605.5.2.2.1, listing and approval. It's a new requirement that outdoor gas-fired heating appliances shall be listed and labeled in accordance with ANSI. So that's kind of to your question earlier, Justin. Section 610, closed dryer exhaust systems. This was a new requirement in the fire code that states closed dryer exhaust systems shall be installed in accordance with the International Mechanical Code or the Fuel Gas Code. The exhaust system is required to be maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's instruction to prevent linter debris buildup. This was another one they kind of brought over just to clarify, because it always has been kind of a thing that, you got to clean your exhaust for your dryers, but it was never specifically called out in the fire code. So with that, I'll turn it over to Deputy Fire Marshal Stallenwerk, and if the board is looking for a break.
Take a 5-minute. You want to get started again?
I am. Good morning. My name is Dawn Stallenwork, Deputy Fire Marshal with the Fargo Fire Department. I'm going to be covering chapters 7 through 11 of the International Fire Code. A lot of it you may have heard when you guys heard the building code amendments and changes. So feel free to stop me along the way, but I'm going to get started. I'm going to start with section 701.6, Owner's Responsibility on page 7.1. This is under the general requirements for fire and smoke protection features. This section was modified to create an owner's responsibility to conduct annual inspections and repair as necessary for fire-resistant rated protection. This includes a new reference back to section 602.4.1 and 602.4.2 of the IBC. Those sections in the IBC are section 602.4.1 contains the provision for type 4A construction, mass timber with fire-rated components covering the mass timber. IBC section 602.4.2 contains the provisions for type 4B construction, mass timber with fire-resistant rated components covering portions of the mass timber members. Moving on to section 703.2, repair of penetrations, under section 703 penetrations. This is a new subsection providing guidance for the repair or replacement of materials protecting penetrations. They're to be repaired with materials and systems which meet or exceed the code requirements applicable at the time of assembly construction. Section 704.2, repair of joints and voids. This is similar to the previously noted section change. This is a new subsection providing guidance for the repair of or replacement of materials protecting joints and voids to be repaired with materials and systems which meet or exceed the code requirements applicable at the time of assembly construction. Page 7.3, section 708, spray fire-resistant materials and intumescent fire-resistant materials. This is a new section addressing the maintenance requirements for spray fire-resistant materials and intumescent fire-resistant materials. It requires that they are inspected visually to verify substrate is not exposed. Moving on to chapter 8, which is interior finish and decorative materials and furnishings. We're going to start on page 8.7, or 8-7, excuse me, under 806, natural decorative vegetation in new and existing buildings. Section 806.1.1, we're proposing an amendment by adding the following exception. Exception 3, for the purposes of this provision, churches shall not be deemed public buildings and may utilize natural or resin-bearing cut trees in the altar area of the church. No electric lighting is allowed on the trees. This is a long-standing amendment which allows churches to have trees as decorations. Natural cut trees are required to comply with section 806. Section 806.1.4, fire retardant treatment for natural cut trees. New section providing guidance on the requirements for fire retardant treatment applied to natural cut trees. And I believe that pretty much just says that you need to follow the manufacturer's requirements for the treatment that you're using. On page 8-10, section 808.5, place structures added to existing buildings. This section has been modified and states that when place structures exceed 10 feet in height or 150 square feet in area are added to an existing building, they shall meet the requirements of IBC section 424. Moving on to chapter 9, fire protection and life safety systems. Page 9-1, section 901.4.3, alterations to buildings and structures. This is a new subsection which requires approval by the fire code official for removal or modification to any fire protection or life safety system. Continuing on to page 9-6, under section 903, automatic sprinklers. This is a new subsection 903.2.4.2, group F1 distilled spirits. This new subsection requires an automatic sprinkler system throughout a group F1 area, fire area used for the manufacture of distilled spirits. Page 9-7. This is a new subsection 903.2.9.3, group S1 distilled spirits and wines. This new subsection requires an automatic sprinkler system throughout a Group S1 fire area used for the bulk storage of distilled spirits and wines.
Is this independent of the size of the building or square footage of the building?
The way it states is it's required throughout the S1 area used for the bulk storage of wines and distilled spirits.
So I'm just wondering about, so the F1 distilled spirits and the S1 distilled spirits and wine, Group 1 fire, I'm just wondering if, say, somebody has a 1,000 square foot, they have to put a sprinkler system in?
Let me just, I'm gonna look at the specific section real quick here so we can see. Because the way I'm reading it, it's, throughout the fire area used for, and I want to make sure that when I transferred it over. It says, it's specifically just right as I typed it, it's shall be provided throughout the F1 fire area used for the manufacturer. So if you're manufacturing it, it needs to be sprinklered throughout, and I would assume we would go to fire barriers.
Yeah, and I think part of your question is probably when would it become bulk storage of distilled
Right.
spirits? And we'll have to pull up the definition, I bet, of that, but there's definitely gonna be a threshold there where, 5 boxes of wine is not bulk storage of.
Right, some guy has not necessarily his garage, but, he's doing wine or beer, and it's 1,000 square feet, and to have to bring in a special sprinkler system for that size of a building is could be a real,
I think we could look into it to find out what that threshold is. I have a feeling that it's probably defined somewhere. I just don't have that in front of me
Okay.
right now.
okay. Thank
That
you.
is we are getting requests for designing microbreweries in
Right.
homes because people are making craft beers. So let us know what that
I got
is.
a call from a guy for a small wine operation, and it's just like, well, if he has to put in a sprinkler system, when you have to bring in a 4-inch line or whatever, that can be a pretty significant cost, so.
So I don't know, is that something we need to get back on the definition?
Yeah, we'll bring that back.
Thank you.
Moving on to section 903.2.9.4, Group S1 upholstered furniture and mattresses. This is moved from a section from the previous IFC, and it's its own subsection now, and includes a new exception for self-service storage facilities not greater than 1 story above grade plane, where all storage spaces can be accessed directly from the exterior. That is when a sprinkler system is not required. Section 903.2.10 S2 parking garages. This is modified, requiring automatic sprinklers in open parking garages which exceed 48,000 square feet. So this we could run into with large parking garages here.
So that means that in a open air parking garage, that would exceed 48,000 square feet, you're gonna have to have a dry sprinkler system?
Correct.
That's new?
That specific requirement regarding open parking garages, yep.
What was what the previous threshold was? Was it?
I think we're
square
open parking
footage that
garages
changed?
not,
Yeah, so and when we talked about this one in the building code, I did kind of call this out because this is a big change. But what happened is, as they were working through this, they've kind of found that a lot of the stuff in the open parking garages was using kind of a theory from cars from back in the 60s, where they were all metal gas tanks. And so they've had a couple instances where they've had fires in parking garages, and it's burned to the extent of where they couldn't stop it. And it took down the structure. One in England, that burned like 1,400 cars. And so the code looked at these and said, the cars are a lot more plastic, the fire load's higher, the fuel tanks are made of plastic, so they're letting go once they're exposed to heat. And so previously, there really wasn't a threshold. for open parking garage. You could, as long as you maintain open and built with type 1, you could kind of just go. And so now they're bringing in and saying, okay, 48,000 is going to be our cap before you guys start sprinklering.
And 48,000 includes, if it's 4 stories at 12,000, that's 48,000. So it's total square footage. It's not on a level.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of them are quite a bit bigger than that.
And the ones that we do have right now have standpipe systems in them, correct?
Depending on the height, but yes,
Depending upon, right, anything over, what is it, 3 stories? Or is it- Yeah,
typically.
okay, thank you.
Same page, 9-7, section 903.2.10.2, mechanical access enclosed parking garages. This is a new subsection requiring approved automatic sprinkler systems throughout buildings used for the storage of motor vehicles and mechanical access enclosed parking garages. The portion of the building that contains the mechanical access enclosed parking area garage shall be protected with a specially engineered automatic sprinkler system. We may be seeing these in the future, but it's the automatic, like, parking garages.
Yeah, we have a couple buildings in the Twin Cities right now that have them that are being put in there. Pretty
Okay.
interesting. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we might see it sometime here in the future.
Page 9-8, section 903.3.1 is amended to read as follows. Sprinkler system shall be designed with a 5 PSI safety margin and installed in accordance with section 903.3.1.1, 903.3.1.2, or 903.3.1.3, and other chapters of this code as applicable. This amendment is requested due to the fluctuation of water pressure at various times of the day and also throughout the year. This is an amendment that we've carried forward for several years, requiring the 5 PSI safety margin.
With the code without this?
Is there no safety margin? In other words, if the city of Fargo says 42 PSI at 42 or 45? So
Yep.
there is no safety
The code
in
doesn't,
their required of their calculation.
not within the IFC, they don't state a safety margin.
Okay, thank you.
Section 903.3.1.1.1 exempt locations is amended and by adding the following exceptions. Would like to add elevator machine rooms and machinery spaces where sprinklers are not installed in elevator machine rooms. Shunt trip required in accordance with the IBC 3005-0.5 shall not be installed. This proposed amendment would allow elevator machine rooms to not be sprinklered and thereby remove the requirement for elevator shunt trips. This amendment would match the construction practices currently occurring in the state of Minnesota. Page 9-9, table 903.2.11.6, additional required fire protection systems, modified for mechanical access parking garages, stationary and mobile energy storage systems, and record storage as addressed in the applicable code sections. Page 9-10, section 903.3.1.2, NFPA 13R sprinkler systems. This section is modified to state that the number of stories of the Group R occupancy shall be measured from grade plane only. This change affects podium-style buildings. The use of an NFPA 13R system is limited to where all of the following conditions exist. 4 stories or less above grade plane. The floor level of the highest story is 30 feet or less above the lowest level of fire department access. And the floor level of the lowest story is 30 feet or less below the lowest level of fire department access. So this could affect several of our podium-style buildings that we have had going up recently.
So how would it affect it? What's an example of this changing?
Yep, so some of the podium-style buildings that we currently have going up in town have 13R sprinkler systems above that podium base. And this, in essence, would make them have a 13R or 13 system throughout the whole space if they don't meet those requirements.
Okay.
Page 9-10, section 903.3.1.2.2, corridors and balconies and the means of egress. This section is modified and addresses corridors and egress balconies that are not adequately open to the exterior to provide heat and smoke escape. New clarifying language stating where any of the following conditions apply, a sprinkler system shall be provided. Corridors with combustible floor walls, corridors with an interior change of direction exceeding 45 degrees, corridors that are less than 50% open to the outside atmosphere at the ends, open-ended corridors and associated exterior stairways and ramps as specified in section 1027.6, exception 3, egress balconies not complying with section 1021.2 and 1021.3. Page 9-11, section 903.3.5, water supplies is amended to read as follows. Water supplies for automatic sprinkler systems shall comply with this section and the standards referenced in section 903.3.1. The potable water supply shall be protected against backflow in accordance with the requirements of this section and the International Plumbing Code. For connections to public waterworks systems, the water supply tests used for design of fire protection systems shall be adjusted to account for seasonal and daily pressure fluctuations based on information from Water Supply Authority as approved by the fire code official. The change that we're proposing, underground water supply piping shall be constructed of a material allowed by Fargo Municipal Code 16 and Chapter 22 and shall be allowed to extend into the buildings through the slab or wall not more than 24 inches. The proposed amendment would allow the use of PVC pipe for the fire main as it passes into the building. Page 9-16. This is under section 905 standpipe systems. Section 905.1.1 is amended by adding the following. Standpipe hose. The installation of fire hose on standpipe may be omitted where approved by the fire code official. Approved standpipe hose valves and connections shall be provided where required. We'd like to continue this amendment for standpipe hoses because unlined linen hose is seldom if ever used and employees do not get trained in its use. Section 905.3.1, height. Modifications stating that when a standpipe is required in a parking garage, whether open or closed, the standpipe shall be a class 1 standpipe. Moving to section 906, portable fire extinguishers. These will be on pages 9-18 and 19. Section 906.1, portable fire extinguisher. New exception to the requirement for portable fire extinguishers in Group S occupancies where forklift, powered industrial trucks, or power cart operators are the primary occupants. Fire extinguishers are not required in these occupancies or situations in accordance with all of the following. They have to have vehicle-mounted extinguishers meeting a class 40A 80BC extinguisher. They have to have a spare replacement fire extinguisher on site. Fire extinguisher training shall occur and daily inspections for the vehicle-mounted fire extinguishers need to happen as well. This new exception for portable fire extinguishers, there is a new exception that they're not required in Group U communication equipment structures as well. Moving on to table 906.1, additional portable fire extinguishers. The addition and requirements for portable generators are added to the list for portable fire extinguishers. Page 9-25, section 907, fire alarm and detection systems. Subsection 907.2.10, Group S. There's a new manual fire alarm requirement for Group S public and self-storage occupancies that are 3 stories or greater. Visible appliances are not required within the storage units. Manual fire alarm boxes or pull stations are not required in buildings equipped throughout with an NFPA 13 fire sprinkler system. Subsection 907.4, initiating devices. This covers pages 9-28 and 9-29. This clarifies when a fire alarm is required by the International Fire Code, and it says that it shall activate the occupant notification system. Page 9-30, subsection 907.5.2.1.2, maximum sound pressure. This section is modified and it increases the average ambient noise threshold where visible alarm notification devices are required from 95 dBA to 105 dBA. Section 907.5.2.1.3, audible signal frequency in Group R1 and R2 sleeping areas. New subsection requiring audible fire and smoke alarm notification in R1 and R2 sleeping areas to be 520 hertz for single and multiple station smoke alarms. This mirrors the NFPA 72 fire alarm and signaling requirements. When a smoke alarm is unable to produce the 520 hertz signal, the 520 hertz signal shall be provided by a listed notification appliance or smoke detector with an integral 520 hertz base sounder. Section 907.5.2.2.5 standby power. This section is modified, stating that standby power can now be used for emergency voice evac system communication systems. Emergency power was previously required for those systems. Page 9-31, section 905.5.2.3.3.1 wired equipment. This new subsection specifically addresses the requirements relating to future occupant notification capability. New requirement for the fire alarm power supply and circuits stating that they shall not have less than a 5% excess capacity to accommodate future additions to visible notification appliances on every story. Page 9-32, section 907.6.6.2, MIY monitoring, new subsection stating that monitor it yourself, MIY, transmitters to a public safety answering point shall not be permitted unless approved by the fire code official. Section 907.8.3, smoke detector sensitivity. We propose deleting this. It's been deleted in the past and would like to carry it forward. Detector sensitivity requirements as outlined in this section are unrealistic. If detectors function within the listed sensitivity range, we feel that the calibration test is unnecessary. If records show frequency of nuisance alarms, the offending detector shall be replaced or repaired.
I noticed you said shall. When you're talking and, it says, should in
Yep.
writing, is it shall or should?
Thank you. It should. If we have, if we're having nuisance alarms at a specific location, we will work with that property owner to get that remedied. The wording, I believe, is should, but we
You
We
can't force
explain-
should, can you?
no, and we explain the importance of it being an issue for them as well as an issue for us, and usually they want to remedy it just as well as we do. I'm pretty sure it should, isn't it?
Yeah, and so the paragraph you're looking at is actually just our kind of explanatory language.
Right.
So the section would be deleted, so we would enforce just through the maintenance of the fire alarm system. So we would enforce, if there was a problem, we would enforce it through a different section.
Okay, thank you.
Page 9-33, section 908.3 fire alarm system interface. New subsection for section 908 emergency alarm systems. New subsection states that when an emergency alarm system is interfaced with the building fire alarm system, the signal produced at the fire alarm control unit shall be supervisory. Page 9-38, section 909, smoke control systems, subsection 909.17, system response time. This section is modified. The time for the smoke control system to reach full operation is limited to 90 seconds. The previous code edition didn't indicate a time limit. Section 909.20, smoke-proof enclosures through 909.20.6.3, acceptance and testing. These cover pages 9-39 and 9-40. These are new subsections containing construction requirements for smoke-proof enclosures, which are required by the International Fire Code Section 1023.12, smoke-proof enclosures. The requirements of these subsections address the access, construction, door closures, ventilation, natural and mechanical, pressurization of stairways, ramp, and elevator hoistways, associated power, and acceptance testing. This now mirrors what appears in the International Building Code. Page 9-42, section 910, smoke and heat removal, section 910.3.4, vent operation. This new subsection states that smoke and heat removal vent shall have approved automatic and manual means of operation. 910.3.5 fusible link temperature rating. This new subsection states where smoke and heat removal vents are provided in areas with automatic fire sprinklers and the vent operate by a fusible link. This fusible link temperature is now specified to be 360 degrees Fahrenheit. Page 9-43, section 911 explosion control, 911.1.1 general. This is modified. NFPA 68 is the standard on explosion protection for deflagration venting. It's now referenced as a reference document for this section. 9-45, section 911.4 deflagration venting. This is new and approved deflagration venting is required to be installed in accordance with NFPA 68. Page 9-46, section 913, fire pumps, section 913.1. New exception, fire pumps for automatic sprinkler systems and installed in accordance with section 903.3.1.3 NFPA 13D systems, or P 2904 of the International Residential Code are not required to be listed or comply with NFPA 20. So basically your residential systems, the fire pumps going in for the residential systems, don't have to be listed or comply with the requirements of NFPA 20, which would, if you're installing a 13 or a 13R system, your pump would have to meet those requirements. Page 9-46, section 913.2, circuit supplying fire pumps. This section is modified stating that conductors powering fire pumps can now be covered with a minimum of 2 inches of concrete to provide the required fire resistance rated protection in addition to other methods previously allowed. Page 9-47, section 914, fire protection based on special detailed requirements. Section 914.3.1.2, water supply to fire pumps. This section is modified to include type 4A and type 4B construction that are more than 120 feet in building height in the redundant water supply fire pump requirements to the fire pump. This section was previously only required in buildings that were more than 420 feet in building height to have a redundant water supply to their fire pump. So now, for the wood frame construction, it's required at 120 feet. Page 9-48, section.
Could you define redundant water system, water supply?
So you'd have to have supply coming in from a different water main or potentially another source, a redundant water supply for the fire pump at certain heights based on building construction.
And so it's 120 feet, so 12 stories of 10 foot. And this is just for wood construction?
Yep, just for the type 4A and 4B. So it's required for all other construction types at 420 feet, but when you're doing the wood frame construction, then it's required at 120 feet.
If that main is looped, does that qualify for redundant or not?
What did you ask?
I said if that main is looped, does it qualify for redundant, or do we have to have a separate, totally separate main?
Yeah, I think this is requiring the separate main into the building, but the reason this one got called out this year is because of all the new wood high-rise stuff that came in through the building code. And so, typically on any of the conventional construction that we've seen up till now, we would never deal with this because, again, it was either for super tall high-rises. They brought it in because of the wood high-rises. So then you're talking about a redundant supply so that we know that building could be self-fire protected even in the event of maintenance or something like that.
So what comes to my mind is they need like a, 30,000 gallon, 50,000 gallon, whatever it is, storage tank as a redundant source, but that's.
It could be just a second fire main coming in, just so that you had the ability to, let's say they were doing construction on Broadway and they had to shut that down. You had another fire main coming in off 2nd Avenue. So they can still supply your building. Your building is still self-sufficient That would meet the redundant requirements.
Okay.
Page 9-48, section 914.7, special amusement areas. This section is modified and has specific provisions were added to address puzzle rooms. Puzzle rooms were added to the definition of special amusement area and therefore fall within the requirements of section 914.7.1 for automatic sprinkler system and section 914.7.2 automatic smoke detection.
Does that, what does that mean for, I get it, so your people are locked in these rooms or whatever. Is this, so does this, how does this affect,
Somebody puts one in, again, area, square footage of a building that doesn't have a sprinkler system in it. You know, a 5,000 square foot metal building or whatever, and they decide to add a puzzle room in it.
Special amusement areas are very restrictive in that sense. So if you, let's say you wanted to put in a puzzle room and you wanted to do that, if you wanted to lock them in, you will be required to sprinkler in.
So you'll have to be in a building that has a sprinkler in it, or you'll have to bring a sprinkler in for that.
Yep, or, so the other thing we've seen though is there's actually other ways to do it. You know, there's puzzle rooms that would allow you to play the game and unlock your way in. That would not require it. You know, I think there's a lot of ways around it, or don't actually lock them in at all, just, you know, make it a buzzer or something.
Oh, sure, okay.
But once if you want that threshold where you're gonna lock somebody in, then yeah, it is very restrictive in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to chapter 10, means of egress, page 10-7, section 1006.2.2.4, electrical rooms. This is modified to state that when an electrical room is rated at 1,000 volts or less, location and number of exits and exit access doorways shall be provided in accordance with section 110.26 of NFPA 70 and section 110.33 of NFPA 70, when electrical equipment is rated over 1,000 volts. Panic hardware is required in accordance with section 1010.2.9.2. Page 10-10, section 1008, means of egress illumination. Illumination level under normal power, which is section 1008.2.1. This section is modified and additional requirements specifically regarding exits is addressed. This illumination level at 10-foot candles at the walking surface along exit stairways, and at the required landings when the stairway is in use. Page 10-11, subsection 1009.2.1, elevators required. This section is modified to address occupied roofs, stating that they need an accessible route requirement, including elevators. For example, if there's a 3-story building with an occupied roof, elevators are required in accordance with this section, whereas it was not previously required for this scenario. Page 10-13, section 1009.8.1, system requirements is hereby amended to read as follows. Two-way communication systems shall provide communication between each required location and the fire command center or central control point location approved by the fire department. Where the central control point is not constantly attended, the two-way communication system shall have a timed automatic telephone dial-out capability to a monitoring location. We're removing the option to have it dial 911. The two-way communication system shall include both audible and visible signals. This amendment removes the possibility of having a system dial directly to dispatch. Fire alarm code restricts dialers from calling directly to dispatch centers in order to ensure the reliability of the center, and this amendment will treat the two-way communication system similarly. Page 10-14, section 1010, doors, gates, and turnstiles. Subsection 1010.1.1, size of door. This section's modified, stating the maximum width of a swinging door. It's been removed. It was previously 48 inches. The minimum clear opening width for a non-accessible shower or sauna compartment, toilet stall or dressing, fitting room, or changing room have now a required minimum width of 20 inches. Page 10-16, section 1010.2.4, locks and latches. This is an addition. 4 exceptions that fall into 2 basic categories were added to the general locking section. The 2 basic categories are when needed for clinical needs of the care recipient, or when an exterior area of egress backs into the building. The exception for group I1, condition 2, and group I2 pertain to when clinical needs require such control. In this case, there's provisions for staff being able to readily unlock the doors at all times. The section pertaining to exterior areas which egress back into the building provides a balance for safety and building security. Provisions are in place based on occupant load and occupancy. Pages 10-17 and 10-18, sections 1010.2.8, locking arrangements and educational occupancies. This section's modified. It's been expanded to include I4 occupancies. It now explicitly allows for remote locking and unlocking of doors from an approved location. Any modification to fire door assembly shall be in accordance with NFPA 80.
Was this specifically to address lockdown systems in schools? Is that?
Yep, it's in relation to that, and now it's been expanded to include the I4 daycares.
Okay.
Section 1010.2.9, panic and fire exit hardware. This section's modified to include courtrooms to the exceptions which permit the use of locked or delayed egress exit doors in accordance with 1010.2.13, item 13. Section 1010.2.9.1, refrigeration machinery rooms. This is an addition. Refrigeration machinery spaces which are over 1,000 square feet are now required to have 2 exits or exit access doorways that swing in the direction of travel and are equipped with panic or fire exit hardware.
This is, and I think I know the answer to this, but this is not retroactive, correct? Or is it?
No, these are not retroactive.
So this is for new construction?
Correct.
Thank you.
Section 1010.2.9.2, rooms with electrical equipment. This section's modified. The threshold for requirement of panic hardware in these spaces has been reduced to 800 amperes from 1,200 amperes and considers other requirements that were present in NFPA 70. Page 10-23, section 1011, stairways. Subsection 1011.1, exceptions are hereby amended to read as follows. 1 will be within rooms or spaces used for assembly purposes, stepped aisles shall comply with section 1030. And exception 2, a stairway complying with section 1011, except where in a business, factory, mercantile, storage, or utility that occupancy that serves an area of 750 square feet or less and is not open to the public, that has a maximum riser height of 8 inches and a minimum tread depth of 9 inches, has a minimum width of 36, and has at least 1 handrail that terminates at the top and bottom of the riser and otherwise complies with section 1014. Pages 10-23 and 10-24, section 1011.5.2, riser height and tread depth. Exception 3 and 6 of section 1011.5.2 is amended in part to read as follows. In group R3 occupancies within dwelling units, in group R2 occupancies, and in group U occupancies that are accessory to the group R3 occupancy or accessory to individual dwelling units in group R2 occupancies, the maximum riser height shall be 8 inches. The minimum tread depth shall be 9 inches. For exception 6, stairways used only to attend equipment or private stairways serving an occupant load of 10 or fewer persons which are not accessible to the public are permitted to have a maximum 8-inch riser height and a minimum 9-inch tread depth. These are amended to match the building code. Moving on to pages 10-33 and 10-34, section 1017, exit access travel distance. Subsection 10-17.3.2 atriums. Section 1017.3.2.1 egress not through an atrium. Section 10.17.3.2.2 exit access travel distance at the level of exit discharge. Section, I think that's supposed to be 1017.3.2.3 exit access travel distance at other than level of exit discharge. This is clarifying language regarding the exit requirements for atriums. When the path of egress travel is not at the level of exit discharge from the atrium, the portion of the total permitted exit access travel distance that occurs within that atrium shall not be greater than 200 feet.
Could I ask a question? This sounds like something that should be covered under the building code, like the last one? Or is this,
Yep, it is.
okay. I'm just wondering, how is this, from a code standpoint, how is it administered? Is it administered through the building code or through the fire code?
So it'll fall under the building code.
And it matches the building code?
Correct.
Like the last one,
Yep.
where the treads?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Page 10-35 and 10-36. This is sections 1020 corridors, subsection 1020.5 dead ends. This is modified for group I2 condition 2 occupancies, which are hospitals. They can now have a dead end corridor up to 30 feet in length when the corridor does not serve patient rooms or patient treatment spaces. This was previously limited to 20 feet. Page 10-38, section 1023. Subsection 1023.11, tactile floor level signs. This is modified where floor level exit signs are provided in interior exit stairways and ramps. A floor level sign in visual characters, raised characters, and braille shall be located at each floor level landing adjacent to the door leading from the exit stairway to the ramp, from the exit stairway and ramp into the corridor. Page 10-44, section 1029, egress courts. This section is modified and has been changed to specifically address egress courts serving as an exit discharge component in the means of egress system. This indicates width requirements, including minimum width not less than 44 inches, construction and opening requirements. Page 10-46, subsection 1030.6.3.1, automatic sprinklers for open air assembly seating. This is modified to state that where open air seating exists in areas enclosed with walls and ceilings, an improved automatic sprinkler system shall be provided in accordance with 903.3.1.1. Exceptions exist for the floor area used for contests, performances, and entertainment when the roof construction is more than 50 feet above the floor level and use is restricted to low fire hazard uses. Press boxes and storage facilities less than 1,000 square feet and open air assembly seating facilities where seating and the means of egress in the seating areas are essentially open to the outside. Page 10-50, section 1030.16, handrails. This is clarification. This section is to address social stairs that are intended to function more as seating, such as those found in schools. This section indicates when 2 handrails are required and the provisions for the second handrail. Page 10-50, section 1030.16.1, discontinuous mid-aisle handrails. This is clarification. This section continues on to state that once the 2 handrails are required, the mid-aisle handrail shall be discontinuous. Provisions for the required gaps and breaks are included in this section. Page 10-51, subsection 1031.2, where required for emergency and escape and rescue. The section's been modified in regards to storm shelters. Storm shelters constructed in accordance with ICC 500 are not required to have emergency escape and rescue opening in accordance with section 1031. Page 10-52, section 1031.4, emergency escape and rescue doors. This is an addition Where a door is provided as the required emergency escape or rescue opening, it shall be swinging or sliding. Section 1031.5.3, drainage for emergency escape and rescue openings. Addition of the provisions for window well drainage to be connected to the building drainage system. This relates back to IBC section 1805. Moving on to chapter 11. So 11-1, this is the construction requirements for existing buildings. Chapter 11 is hereby deleted with the exception of sections 1103.8 and 1103.9. This will match the requirements of the IPMC section 704.6 and 705. IFC section 1103.8 requires smoke alarms in group I1 and R occupancies. IFC section 1103.9 requires carbon monoxide alarms in dwelling unit sleeping areas. And that wraps up my portion. I will hand it over, I think, to Deputy Fire Marshal Risgaard. Okay.
Thank you.
How long are we going today? What's that?
The meeting is scheduled until 11:30.
11:30. Okay.
I don't know.
Do you want to start the next section? I would guess it'd probably be 20 minutes.
I'm just wondering if we have the room till 11:30 and it's 11:26,
Probably should wait.
should we
Finish.
wait to start, and restart at a?
That's up to you guys.
Yeah, I think.
'Cause we won't complete it entirely regardless.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'd say this may be a good stopping point here by the time we
Okay.
wrap it up in a
If
couple
that's
minutes.
all right.
Does
Does that work for you
everyone
guys
over there?
schedule wise? Okay. All right. Do we have any staff reports to be made prior to calling for adjournment?
I don't believe there are any.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.